when two maintenance workers pulled up to a gated property on Old Sunset Trail in the hills outside Santa Fe, New Mexico on February 26, 2025, they expected an ordinary day of routine work. What they found instead would shock the entire world and set off one of the most talked-about investigations in recent Hollywood memory. Behind the heavy iron gates of a sprawling 13,000-square-foot mansion, two-time Academy Award-winning actor Gene Hackman and his wife, classical pianist Betsy Arakawa, lay dead. Their bodies had been there for days. And what investigators found inside those walls, from a rodent-infested estate to a heartbreaking digital trail of desperate Google searches, painted a picture far more tragic, far more haunting, and far more complex than anyone could have imagined. This is the full, verified story of what was discovered inside Gene Hackman's mansion. And it will leave you shocked. The Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office received the emergency call at approximately 1:45 in the afternoon on February 26, 2025. Deputies arrived at the couple's property on Old Sunset Trail in the Hyde Park area of Santa Fe to find a scene unlike anything many of them had encountered before. The front door to the residence was unlocked and open. That detail alone raised immediate red flags. Gene Hackman, fiercely private and reclusive for the better part of 2 decades, was not the kind of man who left his front door wide open to the world. Inside, deputies made 2 grim discoveries in 2 separate rooms. Gene Hackman, 95 years old, was found in a small room near the back of the house, close to a side door that led outside. He was dressed in gray sweatpants, a blue long-sleeve t-shirt, and brown slippers. A walking cane lay near his body, along with a pair of sunglasses. Based on the positioning and the way the cane and glasses had fallen, investigators believed he had collapsed suddenly and unexpectedly. On the other side of the house, in a bathroom, lay the body of Betsy Arakawa, 65. A space heater had been knocked over on the bathroom floor. An open prescription pill bottle sat on the counter, with pills scattered across the surface. Both bodies showed severe signs of decomposition, bloating in the face, and mummification in the hands and feet. They had clearly been dead for a long time before anyone came looking. And then there were the dogs. 3 of the couple's pets had been inside the home. When deputies arrived, 2 dogs were still alive, moving through the house on their own. The 3rd dog was found dead, locked inside a crate. Police body cam footage later released to the public would show one of the surviving dogs sitting loyally beside Betsy Arakawa's body in the bathroom, as if standing guard over her even in death. That image would move people around the world to tears. The Santa Fe County Sheriff, Adon Mendoza, held a press conference the following day. He chose his words carefully but could not hide the gravity of the situation. He confirmed that the deaths appeared suspicious and that a full investigation had been launched. At that point, carbon monoxide poisoning was floated as one early theory, partly because Hackman's own daughter, Leslie Ann Hackman, had spoken publicly about believing a gas leak may have played a role. She told reporters that her father, despite being 95, was in remarkably good shape. He still practiced Pilates and yoga several times a week. There were no signs of major health decline before he died, she said. The New Mexico Gas Company was brought in immediately to sweep the property. They checked every gas line and pipe on the estate. Investigators simultaneously ordered carbon monoxide tests on both bodies. The results came back negative. Carbon monoxide was ruled out entirely. Authorities then turned their attention to the bodies themselves, to the house, and to what the couple's final days had actually looked like. What they uncovered was not the dark mystery that early headlines had suggested. It was something sadder, stranger, and far more real. The interior of the Hackman mansion shocked investigators not because of what it suggested about foul play, but because of the condition it was in. When body cam footage was eventually released to the public in April 2025, viewers saw a home that looked nothing like the manicured estate of a Hollywood legend. The residence was cluttered, strewn with loose items and food. There was a COVID-19 test box visible in a trash can. Oxygen canisters ordered from Amazon were found on the property. And in the outbuildings, the garages, sheds, and casitas scattered across the 12-acre compound, investigators found something that would turn out to be the key to the entire case. Rats. Dead rodents. Rodent nests. Droppings throughout. The New Mexico Department of Public Health conducted a full environmental assessment of the property in early March 2025, just 1 week after the bodies were discovered. What they found was alarming. Rodent feces were documented in 3 separate detached garages, 2 casitas, and 3 sheds. A live rodent, a dead rodent, and at least one rodent nest were discovered in 3 different garages alone. 2 of the vehicles parked on the property also showed signs of infestation: nests, feces, and visual sightings of rodents inside the cars themselves. Live traps had already been set up in several of the outbuildings, suggesting the couple had known about the problem and were attempting to deal with it. This was not just a maintenance issue. This was a death sentence. Because the hantavirus, a rare, serious, and often fatal respiratory illness, is spread precisely this way, through exposure to rodent droppings, urine, and saliva. And hantavirus, investigators would later confirm, is exactly what killed Betsy Arakawa. In a press conference held on March 7, 2025, New Mexico's chief medical investigator, Dr. Heather Jarrell, delivered the official cause of death for both members of the couple. Betsy Arakawa died from hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, or HPS, a condition that begins with flu-like symptoms including fever, muscle aches, headaches, and fatigue, before escalating into a catastrophic respiratory crisis. The lungs fill with fluid. Cardiac failure can follow. The mortality rate for HPS hovers around 35%. There is no specific treatment and no cure. Betsy most likely died on February 11, 2025. That date was established because all of her email activity, which had been regular and consistent, stopped completely on that day. Her last digital footprint went cold at a precise moment, and the physical autopsy confirmed inflammation in her lungs consistent with HPS. But what truly broke the hearts of people who followed this story were the records that emerged later, in April 2025. Investigators released Betsy's online search history, email records, and phone activity from the days leading up to her death. What those records showed was a woman who felt something terribly wrong was happening inside her body, and who spent her last waking days desperately trying to understand it. On February 8, Betsy began searching Google for information about flu-like symptoms and respiratory illness. On February 10, she searched flu and nosebleeds, and then, 1 minute later, COVID nosebleeds. That same afternoon, she typed, "Can COVID cause dizziness?" On the morning of February 11, she sent an email to her massage therapist, canceling their upcoming appointment. She wrote that Gene had woken up with flu or cold-like symptoms, that he had taken a COVID test which came back negative, but that she wanted to reschedule out of caution. That email would be one of the last messages she ever sent. She also ordered oxygen canisters from Amazon for what she described as respiratory support. Later on February 11, security camera footage from a nearby shopping area showed Betsy visiting a pet food store and a grocery store. She was wearing a medical mask. She looked unwell. The next morning, February 12, she searched for a concierge medical service in Santa Fe and called them. The call lasted less than 2 minutes. She missed their return call that same afternoon. She never reached a doctor. She never received treatment. By that evening, or sometime shortly after, Betsy Arakawa was dead. What happened next is perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this entire story. Gene Hackman did not die on February 11th. He survived. He was alive inside that house, with his wife's body in the bathroom on the other side of the property, for approximately 1 full week. He died on or around February 18, 2025, a date established by the last recorded event on his cardiac pacemaker, which registered an abnormal heart rhythm on that day and then went silent. Dr. Jarrell confirmed that Hackman had been in what she described as a very poor state of health. The autopsy revealed he had hypertensive atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, severe hardening and narrowing of the arteries driven by years of high blood pressure. He had a history of prior cardiac procedures, including stents, a bypass graft, and an aortic valve replacement. He also had chronic kidney disease related to long-standing hypertension. And he had advanced Alzheimer's disease. That last detail is the one that changes everything. Investigators, and Hackman's own family members, have said that because of how far his Alzheimer's had progressed, Gene Hackman may not have understood that his wife was dead. His daughters, in interviews with police, said their father had not known about his wife's passing. There were no signs that he had called for help. No emergency calls were made from the residence. No neighbors were contacted. The man who had once played the relentless detective Popeye Doyle in The French Connection, who had filled screen after screen with fierce intelligence and raw human presence, was alone in a silent house, confused, deteriorating, perhaps unaware of the true nature of his situation. The autopsy also noted that Hackman showed signs of prolonged fasting in his final days. Without his wife to care for him, without the structure and support she had provided, his body began to fail even faster. Dr. Jarrell noted that his cognitive decline likely prevented him from adequately seeking help or fully comprehending the severity of what was happening around him. He died from heart disease. But Alzheimer's stole his final days from him in a way that was quieter and crueler than almost anything else could have. The 13,000-square-foot compound where the couple had lived for decades sits on 12 acres in the hills outside Santa Fe. It features 6 bedrooms, 10 bathrooms, a swimming pool, a guest house, and a library with sweeping views of the New Mexico landscape. Hackman had designed it as a sanctuary, a place where, after retiring from Hollywood in 2004, he could live entirely on his own terms. He painted. He fished. He rode bikes. He co-authored historical fiction novels. He had not appeared in a film in years, and he had done very little press. He was, by all accounts, deeply content in his private life with Betsy. After the bodies were discovered and the initial investigation concluded, with no foul play suspected, authorities released records, photos, and body cam footage to the public in April 2025. The release came after a court order mandated it, though the Hackman family had sought to keep the records sealed to protect their privacy. The footage and photos showed the interior of the home in its final, unaltered state, cluttered, lived in, and achingly human. Rat traps. A discarded COVID test. Books on shelves. A life interrupted. The property was subsequently listed for sale at $6.25 million in early 2026. The listing agents noted that it had been professionally cleaned and staged, and that it was priced at fair market value, acknowledging that some buyers would be put off by its history, while others might be drawn to it for that very reason. None of what happened inside that mansion should be allowed to overshadow the extraordinary life Gene Hackman lived. He began his career against the odds, attending the Pasadena Playhouse alongside a young Dustin Hoffman, at a time when his own classmates voted him least likely to succeed. He was rejected from audition after audition. He worked small television roles. He fought for every inch of ground he gained in this industry. His breakthrough came with Bonnie and Clyde in 1967, where his portrayal of Buck Barrow earned him an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Then came 1971 and The French Connection. His role as the relentless, morally complex detective Jimmy Popeye Doyle earned him the Academy Award for Best Actor and permanently cemented his place in cinema history. In 1974, he delivered one of his most critically admired performances in Francis Ford Coppola's The French Connection follow-up film, The Conversation, a study in paranoia and guilt that was nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. He played Lex Luthor in Superman in 1978 with a wit and menace that made the villain genuinely unforgettable. He won his second Oscar for Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven in 1992. He was funny, brutal, tender, and surprising, sometimes all in the same film. He appeared in more than 80 movies across 5 decades. When he received his Lifetime Achievement Award at the Golden Globes in 2003, Hollywood was simply acknowledging what audiences had known for years. Gene Hackman was one of the greatest screen actors who ever lived. Clint Eastwood, in a statement released shortly after Hackman's death, said that no actor was more talented than Gene, and that his performances were always real, powerful, and never anything less than perfect. He called Hackman a close friend and said he would miss him deeply. The details that emerged from inside Gene Hackman's mansion were not the details of a mystery thriller. There was no foul play, no hidden secrets, no dark conspiracy lurking beneath the surface of a famous man's final chapter. What investigators found was something more human than that, and in some ways, far more unsettling. They found a couple living in quiet isolation, dealing with the invisible weight of age, illness, and vulnerability. They found a wife who spent her last days trying to understand why she felt so sick, searching for answers on a laptop screen while a deadly disease worked its way through her lungs. They found a husband who survived her, but who may not have known, because a cruel disease had taken that awareness from him. They found a home that had been invaded, silently, by rodents carrying a deadly virus. And they found 2 people who had simply run out of time, with no one close enough to notice until it was already far too late. The dog sitting beside Betsy's body. The cane on the floor next to Gene. The unanswered return call from the medical clinic on February 12th. These are not the details of a Hollywood scandal. They are the details of a tragedy. Quiet, private, and real. Gene Hackman spent the last years of his life doing exactly what he wanted. Away from cameras, away from red carpets, living a full and contented life with the woman he loved in the mountains of New Mexico. That is the life he chose. And it is a life that deserves to be remembered with the same respect and dignity that he carried through every role he ever played. What they found in Gene Hackman's mansion was not shocking because it was sinister. It was shocking because it was human, because it could happen to anyone, and because even the greatest among us, in the end, are only people. Sources: Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office, New Mexico Office of the Medical Investigator, Associated Press, BBC News, Fox News, NBC News, TMZ, The Guardian, USA Today, New Mexico Department of Public Health Environmental Assessment Records.